Good afternoon. For those of you unfamiliar with my work, every year I read through every issue of every English language nutrition journal in the world, so you don't have to. Every year my talks are brand new because every year the science is brand new. I then compile all the most interesting, most groundbreaking, most practical findings and new videos and articles I upload every day to my website, nutritionfacts.org, as was mentioned. Everything on the website is free. There's no ads, no corporate sponsorship, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything. Just put it up as a public service. The latest in nutritional science every day. For those of you who've seen my talks in the past, and I've been to New York a number of times, you know I've addressed some of the most pressing dietary issues of our time. Like, what's the best variety of apple to eat? Or what's the most nutritious nut? Or the best bean? Or the best berry? Or the best bowel movement? I don't know if you remember this from who's number one and number two? Well, it wasn't the New Yorkers. Actually, the most constipated population ever studied in the medical literature, seriously, outputting a mere 3 ounces a day. If you all just eat a big apple once in a while. But I thought this year I'd lighten it up and ask, what's the best way to prevent death? Every year the CDC lists the top 15 causes of death in the United States. I said, well, let's just go through the list. 1 through 15, talk about the role diet may play in preventing, treating, and even reversing our top 15 killers. Killer number 1 is heart disease. In the International Journal of Epidemiology recently, they reprinted this landmark article from the 1950s that started out with a shocking statement. The statement was, in the African population of Uganda, coronary heart disease is almost non-existent. Our number one killer of men and women in this country, number one killer almost non-existent? What were they eating? Oh, they were eating lots of vegetables, green leafy vegetables taken by all. And the protein in their diet was almost exclusively from plant sources. And they had the cholesterol to prove it. Actually very similar to what you see in kind of modern day plant eaters. But look, maybe they were just dying early from other diseases, didn't live long enough to get heart disease. Well, let's see. Here's age-matched heart attack rates, Uganda versus St. Louis. All right, out of 632 autopsies in Uganda, 1 myocardial infarction. All right, out of 632 Missourians, same age and gender distribution, there were 136 myocardial infarctions. Right, more than 100 times the rate of our number one killer. In fact, they were so blown away, they went and did another 1,000, and still, out of 1,427 patients, just the one small healed infarct, meaning it wasn't even the cause of death, less than 1 in 1,000, whereas here in the U.S., heart disease is an epidemic. Here's a list of diseases commonly found here and in populations that eat and live like the U.S., but are rare or even non-existent in populations that eat diets centered around whole plant foods. These are among our most common diseases, like obesity, hiatal hernia, one of the most common problems of the stomach, varicose veins and hemorrhoids, most common venous or diseases of veins. Number 2 cancer killer, colon cancer. Diverticular disease, number one disease of the intestine. Appendicitis, number one cause of emergency abdominal surgery. Gallbladder disease, number one cause of non-emergency abdominal surgery, as well as ischemic heart disease, our most common cause of death. Here, but a rarity among plant-based populations. Heart disease, therefore, is a choice. It's like cavities. If you look at the teeth of people who lived over 10,000 years before the invention of the toothbrush, pretty much no cavities. Didn't brush a day in their lives, no Listerine, no water pick, yet no cavities. Why? Because candy bars hadn't been invented yet, right? Simple, right? Oh, why did George Washington? Well, you know, there are few people, go back in history, that have diseases of royalty, right? When you think of gout, heart disease, obesity, who got those diseases? It was the people, the kings and queens that ate like, but now, modern day America, we can eat like, kings for breakfast, queens for lunch, right? But among populations that weren't eating like royalty, weren't eating these rich diets, they didn't have these kinds of problems. So wait a second. Why do people continue to get cavities when we know they're preventable through dietary changes? Well, because, the pleasure people derive from dessert, outweighs the cost and discomfort of the dentist chair. And look, that's fine, right? Look, as long as people understand the consequences of their actions, right? As a physician, what more can I do? If you decide, right, you're an adult, decide the benefits outweigh the risk for you and your family, then go for it. I certainly enjoy the occasional indulgence. I've got a good dental plan, all right? But what if instead of the plaque on our teeth, we're talking about the plaque building up inside of our arteries? Another disease that can be prevented through diet. Then what are the consequences for us and our families? Right? Now we're not talking about scraping tartar anymore. Now we're talking life and death. The most likely reason all of our loved ones will die is heart disease, right? It's still up to each of us to make up our own minds as to what to eat and how to live, but we should make these choices consciously, right? Educating ourselves about the predictable consequences of our actions. Atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, begins in childhood. By age 10, the arteries of nearly all kids have fatty streaks, the first stage of the disease. And then these plaques start forming in their 20s, get worse in their 30s, and then can start killing us off. In our heart, it's a heart attack. In our brain, the same disease as a stroke. In our limbs, it can mean gangrene. In our aorta, an aneurysm. Right? If there is anyone here today over the age of 10, then the question isn't whether or not to eat healthy to prevent heart disease. It's whether or not we want to eat healthy to reverse the heart disease that we already have. Ornish and Esselstyn proved you can reverse heart disease, not just prevent it, not just stop it in its tracks, but reverse heart disease, open up arteries without drugs, without surgery, just with a healthy plant-based diet. But look, we don't want to wait for our first heart attack to start reversing our arteries and reversing our heart disease, unclogging our arteries. And that's because for half the people that die from heart disease, they die from what's called sudden cardiac death, meaning your first symptom is your last. It's defined as people dying within 60 minutes of their first symptom of heart disease. They feel a little chest pain, 60 minutes, they're maybe with their family, 60 minutes later they're gone from this earth. That's half the people that die from heart disease. So they don't get a chance. Even if they, if they tell the paramedics to not, make the detour to the fast food restaurant on the way there, it's just too late. That's why we can't wait for our first symptoms. We can start reversing our heart disease right now. We can start reversing the heart disease in our kids tonight.